The most important stuff for...
I'm not saying, but I'm just saying, in Rambam Hilchas Talmud Torah 113, now there's some yeshivas that do teach women Gemara, right? And I'm not saying it's wrong.
Okay.
But you have to be able to get around that somehow. You have to, because on the books, Rambam Hilchas Talmud Torah, Halacha 113 says there's a problem. Okay, so those are basically, what does a rabbi mean? I've illustrated the various things that a rabbi could be. And there's a problem with each one, right? Can't be the one running services, right? Can't be that one. Can't be the one making the speech on Shabbos morning. Can't be the one being the leader of the community. We're never going to find one who's answering shilas, and she can't be the teacher. Basically, what you're left with is nothing. There's no room left for a woman to be a rabbi, and therefore there's no such thing as a woman rabbi. I mean, it's just as simple as that. And that's pretty much ends it.
What about Rashi's daughters that wore tefillin?
Okay, before we get to that, I want to say that I have some what are called frequently asked questions on all of that. And there's 7, and I wrote them all out, and I've got the answers for them. Because people are always coming, and they're going, oh, no, and I've got an answer for that, and blah, blah, blah. So here they go. The first one is, what about Rashi's daughters? It's brought down that they wore tefillin.
Yeah.
So the answer to that is Rashi's daughters were not rabbis, and the fact that they wore tefillin was not in contradiction to anything I just said. We're not talking about can a woman wear tefillin. That would be a whole different question. The question is, can a woman be a rabbi? Rashi's daughters were not rabbis, and the answer is no. Next question. Am I boring you?
No. How
could Queen Shlomis have been praised by the Talmud if there should not be a female king? Well, she's not King Shlomo, she was Queen Shlomo. But just the fact that I've mentioned that that says that you should not appoint a female for the king. So there was a queen, and she was running things. Her name was Shlomis. She was in the time of the second base of the Second Temple period, and Talmud brings down that she was praised. So how could that be? So the answer is she wasn't really a queen. Rather, she was the wife and later a widow of a king. Now, her husband wasn't really king either, by the way. But he was a member of a very wealthy and powerful family. I believe they were the Hashmonaim? I forget how it goes.
Yeah.
Right. They were the Hashmonaim?
Yeah.
And who de facto, they held all this power. Okay? Now, she's praised because of her wise and beneficial actions, which were really irrelevant to her position as the widow of the king. Okay, so the Talmud praised her for what a wonderful person she was. It was more like she was praised for being the first lady.
Right.
It would be tantamount to nowadays, let's say the president died, and instead of giving it, let's say, to the vice president, they had the first lady take over.
Yeah.
She's the first lady, she would be like in charge. By the way, they didn't run the Second Temple period according to the Torah. You know that, right? The Second Temple period kings were basically chosen by the Goyim.
Yeah.
And they put their puppets in place. And most of those people, from what I understand, were against the Torah. And the sages had tremendous problems. They were at war with whoever was in charge. Like Herod and these guys. Okay, we're good on that. Next, number 3. Rabbi Ben Zion Uziel, following Tosfos, the Chidah, and Sefer HaChinuch, says that a woman may be a queen as long as the people accept her as such. He says that a woman is ineligible for kingship only when the king is appointed by Sanhedrin. However, when the king is instead chosen democratically by the people, he says nothing prevents a woman from being a king. And therefore, what? And therefore, when we say that you're not allowed to appoint a king, that's only when the Sanhedrin does it. But if the people vote in the king, that's not a problem, and you can have a woman. Right?
Yeah.
So therefore, a woman could have a position of power, or a woman could be a rabbi today, right? What's the answer to that? The answer to that is simple. Electing someone democratically? That's not even called being a king. Okay? A king requires Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin appoints a king. Just like today nowadays they ordain, let's say, a rabbi, or they choose a rabbi and they put a rabbi in charge of a shul, right? Or in a community, right? Electing someone democratically to a position, that's not putting that would be tantamount to electing a shul president, right? Where the members of the congregation get together, the laymen get together, and they pick one of them not to be the communal leader. You know, the president of the shul is not the leader of the community. It's the rabbi who's the community leader, right? But they have, this would be like the person who like is in charge of fundraising, you know, like in charge of picking what building they want. And for that, I think you could use this as a proof that it could be a woman. I think a woman could be a president of a shul. Now, don't quote me on this. It's not, you know, Rabbi Rabbs poskin that a woman can be a president of a shul. I don't know. But I'm just thinking based on this, if she was voted by the chairman, you know, the board members, and they voted a chairman of the board, I don't think there's a problem with that. What do you think about that?
Well, that's interesting because Young Israel, the Young Israel movement, has decreed that women cannot be presidents of congregations.
I don't want to say anything. I'm completely wrong.
There was a conflict with at least one congregation that had elected a woman as president. So I don't have a problem either way. I don't know.
I don't want to. Maybe that if there's some sort of pesach that somebody gave and it explains why a woman can't be president of the shul, then I stand corrected. I have nothing to do with it.
To me, it's a little bit similar that a convert should not take certain positions. A convert should not take a leadership position in Jewish life. So I kind of see many of these issues.
But is the president of a shul really a leadership position?
That's the challenge, because he has no power. Or
that's
authority.
what I was thinking, right? You know, I don't want to say if there's already pesach and some godled said you can't, then I can, and I'm not going to argue. Okay, number 4. How does the Rambam explain Devorah, right? Devorah was this judge.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about Devorah.
How does he explain Devorah? So, my answer is, I think a strong argument could be like this, that Devorah actually avoided direct authority. She never really wanted direct authority. Remember, she insisted, if you know prophets well, that Barak lead the Jews' battle. It wasn't, you know, it was under her direction, but it's his ballgame. And as far as her halachic teachings that we learned about, that I mentioned in the Minchas Chinuch, so you can say that simply that she was never appointed to any position. In other words, people just came to her. She was busy learning. Word got out on the street that she knew a lot of stuff. She knew her Torah. And people would come and then they'd say, hey, Devorah, what do you think about this and that? And she would give it, but she was never like appointed. She never said, you know, I'm the rabbi or I'm in charge. People just came to her casually and asked her questions.
I want to go up on that. Many of the leaders of the Jewish people down through history and in right now are not elected or appointed. They rise on merit. So just like Devorah rose by the merit of her authority and wisdom and inspirational abilities to an important position, doesn't mean that she had a degree from a certain university, that she was appointed by, you know, Israel in a direct election, or that she had any official position. She had a very influential position that she developed on her own through her own wisdom, inspirational abilities, and God-fearing qualities. So too, like the Rambam was not elected, you know, greatest philosopher in the history of Jews. He earned that through his merit. So too today, the greatest rabbis of Israel are not the chief rabbis of Israel. The Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Israel is very low character, while the Sephardic one is a man of some learning. But still,
I'm not.
I know, I'm saying it, you're not. The great rabbis of Israel are not elected and have official positions. So it's entirely possible, kind of with what you're saying, that there could be a woman who arises in Israel or Jewish life today who is like the prophet Devorah, and that she develops influence through her learning, her fear of God, her wisdom, through her inspirational qualities. Doesn't mean she's a rabbi of a synagogue or that she has any official position. She may just sit at home and study all day, and people may come to her to get her wisdom. So it's not an official title, and she may not even, you know, leave the house except to go to the mikveh. I'm done.
Okay. The next, number 5, the 5th question that people often ask are, speaking about Devorah, other commentators say that Devorah was like a king. Like a king, and she was able to what's called exercise authority, sarara. She exercised her authority